Hello, welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The top global story we are tracking this evening: a fragile ceasefire deal between Israel and armed group Hezbollah seems to be holding for now. Both the entities have been exchanging blame over violating the ceasefire in Lebanon. The Israeli military claimed that its warplanes fired over southern Lebanon after it detected Hezbollah activity at a rocket storage facility in the region. As per the truce brokered by the United States and France, Israel will withdraw its troops from the southern Lebanon border. Israeli forces have continued to stop displaced Lebanese people from entering villages that were once attacked. They also urged citizens to stay away from the border region. This warning comes after civilians were seen celebrating and returning home to southern Lebanon. In a statement, the Lebanon army urged residents of border villages to delay returning home until the Israeli military withdraws completely. Meanwhile, Hezbollah said that it has achieved victory over Israeli forces and will continue to monitor Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon. The armed group added that its fighters will continue to remain ready in case of any infringement. Joining us now to take this forward are Anju Gupta, Strategic Affairs expert, and Professor Omer Anas, Assistant Professor at Ankara Yildirim Beyazıt University in Turkey. Anju Gupta, let me begin by asking you what led to this ceasefire. Now, this is historic in the sense it's happening after many years, but even earlier, there was an agreement in 2006 for a ceasefire that was breached by the Israelis. What do you think has brought about this ceasefire today?
Good evening, Parikshit. Thanks for having me on the show. Let us try and understand what this agreement is about. This agreement is a US proposal supported by France, which has been made with governments of Lebanon and government of Israel. So there is no Hezbollah directly in this agreement. It's very important to understand that there is no agreement with Hezbollah. The assumption here is that government of Lebanon has committed on behalf of Hezbollah, which is a state within the state. So having said that, this agreement is nothing but invoking UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which was adopted in 2006, as you've already said. So basically, which means that fighting will stop between the two sides for only 60 days. And in these 60 days, Hezbollah will withdraw, will move above Litani River in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, and Israeli forces will move out of Lebanese territory, which is below the, south of the blue line, within 60 days. So it's not happening immediately. That is the understanding. That is what the finer print of this agreement says. Now, why is it happening? We know that both the sides, basically Hezbollah and Israeli forces, they have been at war with each other since October 8, 2023. Since September, Israeli army had upped the ante, whereby, they mounted very serious aerial bombing in Beirut and other areas. Hezbollah's top leadership has suffered heavy losses. So Hezbollah has really suffered a lot. That's their side of the story. But Israeli forces have also suffered. They're fighting a multi-front war, but they have suffered a lot after they started ground operations into southern Lebanon on October 1. So by October end, Israeli media was reporting that there were 35 fatalities of Israeli forces and 900 soldiers had been injured, the toll was too high. So there has been discomfort within Israeli forces that probably this was the time to review and not just continue with this war, with this combat against Hezbollah. So they were I would say, willingness on both the sides because of the losses that both sides have suffered. I'm not going into it, who suffered more, who suffered less. And I think both the sides have said that they need time to regroup and rebuild. So let's not lose sight of what the sides are saying.
All right. So you're saying that there's a realization on both sides that they have suffered quite a bit. But both sides are already accusing each other of betraying the terms of the ceasefire. So things remain very fragile on the ground. Do you expect this ceasefire to continue? Do you think the agreement will be met?
Well, ceasefire is only for 60 days, which means for 60 days they will not fire at each other, which is not. We know that there have been ceasefire violations have been made by both the sides, at least the accusations are, and it's just been, I think, 2 days or maybe less. Now, ceasefire will depend on Hezbollah and on Israel. It will not depend on anybody else. Yes, US will be in will lead the monitoring mechanism of violations. But in such a short time, it looks unlikely that US will be able to enforce it through the good office of the Lebanese government. It looks unlikely. So it may last 60 days, it may last less. That's how it looks at the moment.
Right. Okay, and what's the prospect of long-term peace in this region? Do you expect what's happened here in terms of a ceasefire can lead to some sort of ceasefire in Gaza as well, Ms. Gupta?
Well, US side has expectation that because Hezbollah has been taken off the field, at least for now, it will bring more pressure on Hamas in terms of Israel not having to fight on one more front, active front in the north, and also demoralizing effect on Hamas. That's the expectation. So the US side believe that this is the right moment to push Hamas for a deal. It looks unlikely for a very simple reason that the far right element, apart from what Hamas may be thinking, what is Iran may be thinking as of now, Israel, the far right element within the Israeli government have a different vision of, the day after in Gaza. They want to control Gaza. They want to control security of Gaza. While this may be completely unacceptable to, I won't say Hamas, to the Palestinian and the entire Sunni Arab world and the lead players in this world who are advocating for a two-state solution. So it looks difficult that the ceasefire with Gaza will happen anytime soon. Looks difficult.
Right. Okay, Professor Omer Anas, welcome to the program. Let me begin by asking you about the situation on the ground in Gaza. Do you think the Biden administration has changed its take on the war in the Middle East as President Biden completes his term? And number two, how do you expect Donald Trump, when he is sworn in as president, to look at the situation in the Middle East? Where do you think we are going right now?
Thank you very much for having me. I should say that the Biden administration has completely failed to use the American influence both on the Arab partners as well as on Israel. And for many reasons, which were mostly about elections, and in which, of course, the Democrats have failed to achieve. And now he is realizing that maybe he could deliver something in concrete. However, I think that it is the Trump administration who is going to deliver a concrete roadmap for stability and peace in the region. The reason is that I have been for long arguing this point that Trump administration in his first term had proposed the Abraham Accord, and he had brought together all the Arab partners, especially Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and they had agreed on many details of the Abraham Accord. However, under the Biden administration, and as Israel was so much emboldened, the two partners who had agreed to the Abraham Accord, they backed out from that, and they have now come back to the same position that without two-state solution, there is no progress. And so Saudi Arabia has clearly said that they cannot go ahead with normalization process with Israel as long as Israel does not show its commitment to the two-state solution. So again, the Trump administration, I think that is going to use his influence over Israel to convince Israelis about to deliver some sort of peaceful and sustainable mechanism for stability in the region. With Hamas or without Hamas, it doesn't matter. But I think that Trump administration will have more influence on Israeli politicians to bring peace and stability.
Right. Ms. Anju Gupta, what do you think would be Netanyahu's real intentions at this stage? It is widely felt and reported in sections of the media that Netanyahu wants to continue being the prime minister, and the only way he can continue being in power is through this war continuing as well. But do you think with the Trump administration in power, and Trump is somebody who is unpredictable, do you think Netanyahu may want to change his strategy on the war, maybe bring some closure, reduce the number of fronts in the war in the Middle East?
I think it's time to recall that over the last 14 months or so, Israel would not have continued with their wars on multi-front if there was no helping hand from the US, be against Hamas or Hezbollah or Houthis or even Iran. So US will is the stance of President Trump is going to play a very important role in what Prime Minister Netanyahu or the far right within Israeli government or Israel as a nation can do or cannot do. So let's get that very clear that this change of guard in the US can have a very big impact on what is happening, what is going to happen in this region. That does not mean war. I'm not saying Trump is going to go to war. In fact, some credible US media has reported that Trump had probably signaled to Israel, during the election time, that wars must end before he takes over on January 20. Now, it can have many different connotations. And their team is also already claiming success for, the ceasefire agreement that has been made. Second, President Trump is going to find a different Middle East. This is not the Middle East that which he left when he left his presidency. So Trump is going to see a new Middle East. There are already two major wars, and there is unease all around. His policies of stopping the war and not starting the war. He's also asking his partners to pay for security, and NATO is a prime example. And it's going to have a bearing on what's going to happen in Ukraine. Same logic, same policy. I don't see any reason why it will not be applied to Israel. But at the same time, Trump team has said that Iran will not be allowed to use proxy terror groups. He's likely to use sanctions and other means than military power against Iran. That's the sense that I have. It'll be for defense of Israel, or whether it'll be in defense of US targets in the region is something I think we'll have to wait and see.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Anju Gupta and Professor Umair for joining us. We are taking a short break, but on the other side, Russian President Putin threatens Ukraine with new missile attacks. A special discussion when we return. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Global Eye. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine continues to intensify, with Moscow launching a barrage of missiles and drones this past week. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said 100 drones and 90 missiles were launched at Ukraine over the past 2 days. Ukraine has said that the attacks hit the country's power infrastructure. President Volodymyr Zelensky called the attack a despicable escalation, accusing Russia of using cluster munitions. Speaking at the Collective Security Treaty Organization summit, Putin insisted that the attacks were in response to strikes deep inside Russian territory. The Russian premier has also threatened to attack decision-making centers in Kyiv with the country's new ballistic missile, Oreshnik. Russia has begun serial production of the missile, which was used to hit Ukraine last week. Ukraine President Zelensky warned that any Russian blackmail would be met with a tough response. Let me go across to our guests. We are joined by Brahma Chalani, strategic affairs expert, and Ola Warasbith, foreign policy expert, to take this discussion forward. Let me go across to Ola first. Ola, how do you see the threats coming from the Russian president? Do you expect some serious escalation in the Russia-Ukraine war in the days to come?
Good evening. Well, these are not the first time that we see this, these threats, of course, and what they are aimed for. We see that they are aimed mainly on the partners and on the countries that support Ukraine, that they are the message to them not to support Ukraine. Vladimir Putin understands power, and it is bold beginning to say that the Oreshnik was launched as a response for Ukraine launching long-range missiles into Russia, because this was Russia which actually which started the war and war on Ukraine. So this blackmailing, we hear it for a long time. However, as you've seen, Putin is ready also for escalation. But previously, you've seen the escalation with also inviting the North Korean forces that now take part in the war from the Russian side. And this was a major escalation, which is very important also to understand for the whole world, especially in Asia, because taking into consideration the level of the war, the level of the battles that are ongoing, the level of the equipment that is used now, the experience that these North Korean soldiers could get in the battle, it could bring them back to Asia. So this is what is important to understand. Going back to this blackmailing, so we suppose that this was mainly the message to the West and to this, not only to the West, to the whole partners that support Ukraine, not to support it, so that Ukraine was weak, because Vladimir Putin understands the power.
All right, so you're saying that this was a message to the West. Let me get in Brahma Chalani. Brahma Chalani, this is a tricky period, isn't it? President Biden wants to leave a legacy behind. In 2 months, you'll have a Trump presidency. Powers such as Russia and also Israel they have the option of taking advantage of the situation, be it Hamas, be it Hezbollah, Iran. Anyone can take advantage of the present situation. So what's your take on the present situation in Europe? Do you think things could worsen? And what is Russia trying to do at this stage?
Biden's legacy is to leave a mess in Ukraine for his successor, Donald Trump. Today, Russia has the momentum on the battlefield. Russian forces are advancing, even if incrementally. They're gaining territory. As a result, Western powers have convinced Ukraine now to shift to a defense-only strategy. A defense-only strategy focused on preventing further territorial losses rather than seeking to reclaim lost territories. A Biden supply of anti-personnel landmines seeks to bolster such defensive defense on the part of Ukraine. But there's also a second aspect that Biden has done recently, which is to provide offensive go-ahead to Ukraine to use American-supplied long-range missiles to strike targets inside Russia. And this has been followed by Britain and France providing similar go-ahead to Ukraine. The problem is this, that these long-range missiles depend on US navigational data and other satellite reconnaissance technology that Ukraine lacks. So in effect, when Ukraine launches any such missile, it's the Western powers that control the flight mission as well as the targeting. From the Russian perspective, this means that NATO forces are directly involved in this war. So this creates escalation and counter-escalation. And we're seeing how, in response to the Biden go-ahead, Russia has stepped up missile and drone attacks on Ukraine, targeting its energy infrastructure. The most recent missile and drone blitz caused substantial damage to Ukrainian energy infrastructure across much of the country. A number of cities were without power after those strikes. Right. And if such strikes continue, and we should not forget that winter has already set in, so if such strikes continue, this will cause a lot of havoc in Ukraine. And therefore, Trump's pledge to end the war seems quite sensible, given the fact that a majority of Ukrainians now, according to the latest opinion survey, a majority of Ukrainians also favor an end to the war.
Right. That is an important point. Ola, what's your sense? Do you think President Zelensky and his team would like some sort of negotiation and settlement before the Trump administration takes control?
Look, we once more need to stress the point that Zelensky and his administration, they are representatives of the people of Ukraine. And when we go back to the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the US administration gave us 3 days 1 week or so, and Ukraine stands. Ukraine now stands for almost 3 years, and this is why it stands, because of the people and because of the cause of people. And this is probably the most important thing you need to understand. Yes, what Russia does now, it targets it targets energy infrastructure, also civilian infrastructure, and the important point to stress here over the last strikes, for example, so it aimed onto the substations of the nuclear power stations, which frankly is a very dangerous thing, because it not only brings troubles to Ukrainians, as me, for example, I'm speaking from at the moment without being without electricity with you, yes, but what it brings, it is also dangerous to the nuclear stations themselves, because these substations they support the working of the nuclear power stations. Without like cooling engines, without that, there could be major events, I mean, which will influence not only Ukraine but also the whole part of the world here. But right. Just coming back to whether the Zelensky and administration would stand for that. For Ukraine, this war is defending not only its territory, but defending its identity. And this is what Russia is targeting here as well, killing people or trying to restudy people on the territories it occupied in Ukraine. So for us, for Ukraine,
Ola, I'll take the final comment from. I'm running out of time.
The most important thing is just peace.
We're running out of time. Yeah. I'll get a final word from Brahma Chalani, because we're just running short of time on the program. Brahma Chalani, final thoughts from you. What do you think is going to be Putin's or Russia's threshold? At what stage will these threats, and they have made threats of a nuclear attack in the past, but at what point do you think Russia could turn these threats into reality?
I don't think there's any danger of Russia using nukes in Ukraine. The danger of a NATO-Russia direct war has passed. That threat was looming large under Biden, but now with Trump about to take office, that threat has receded. The issue is, how will Trump end the war? Because he has boasted publicly that he would end it within 24 hours. Obviously, that was just a boast. But the fact is that when Russia has the advantage on the battlefield and the incoming US president has already committed to ending the war in Ukraine, that gives Moscow more leverage. The fact is that Trump, he has just appointed he's just appointed his Russia-Ukraine envoy, Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, who in an essay a few months ago said that the Ukraine war was an avoidable tragedy caused by the incompetence of Biden, and that going ahead, the focus of US policy ought to be on ending the killings through a peace proposal. In fact, he submitted that peace proposal to Trump, and that's how he got hired as the Trump administration's Russia-Ukraine envoy. So both Trump and his specific envoy for Russia and Ukraine are both committed to seeking peace. But achieving a peace agreement will not be easy because of the reasons that I've described. So while the incoming US administration will be committed to achieving peace, I think the actual realization of that goal may take time.
Right. Thank you so much, Brahma Chalani and Ola, for joining us on the program. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Global Eye. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more news and updates on the other side.